It was the summer of 2018, in a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside Atlanta, Georgia. The streets were lined with identical houses, brick facades, manicured lawns, and the occasional picket fence. The kind of place where life seemed predictable, safe, and routine. But, as we all know, appearances can be deceiving. Meet Lisa, a 34-year-old stay-at-home mom with 2 kids, Oliver, a rambunctious 6-year-old, and Sophie, a sweet but mischievous 4-year-old. Lisa had always been the glue that held her family together, but lately, the cracks in her seemingly perfect life were beginning to show. Lisa's husband, Mark, worked as a financial consultant, a job that demanded long hours, constant travel, and a borderline obsession with spreadsheets. To outsiders, Mark was the quintessential husband, responsible, loyal, and dependable. But to Lisa, he had become something else entirely: distant. Their conversations had dwindled to quick exchanges about the kids, bills, and what was for dinner. The spark that once defined their relationship had faded into the monotony of everyday life. Lisa, however, wasn't the type to complain openly. She adored her kids, her meticulously decorated home, and the life she had built with Mark. But there was one thing missing: a sense of excitement of being truly seen. And this is where things start to take an unexpected turn. It all began at the local community center, where Lisa had recently joined a yoga class. Yoga, she had told herself, was a way to find balance, to reclaim some semblance of her old self. But let's be honest, it was also a convenient escape from the monotony of her daily routine. The instructor, Jake, was everything Mark was not: charismatic, attentive, and, let's face it, ridiculously attractive. In his early 30s, Jake had that effortless charm that made everyone in the room feel special. He'd walk around the class, offering gentle corrections and encouragement, his warm smile disarming even the most self-conscious participants. Lisa noticed Jake noticing her. At first, it was just a glance, a fleeting moment during downward dog or warrior pose. Then, it became more frequent, more deliberate. When he complimented her form during a particularly tricky pose, Lisa felt a flutter she hadn't experienced in years. "Great job, Lisa," Jake said one morning, his hand lightly brushing hers as he adjusted her stance. "You've got a natural flow." A simple compliment, but one that lingered in her mind long after the class had ended. Back at home, Lisa tried to push the thoughts of Jake aside. She focused on her children, folding laundry, and prepping dinner for another evening where Mark would likely come home late, exhausted and preoccupied. But as the days turned into weeks, Lisa found herself looking forward to her yoga sessions in a way that felt different, exciting, even. She started paying more attention to her appearance before class, opting for form-fitting leggings and carefully applied makeup that could pass as effortless. She told herself it was to boost her own confidence, but deep down, she knew there was more to it. Jake, meanwhile, continued to show her attention. Not enough to raise eyebrows, but just enough to keep her intrigued. He'd linger near her mat after class, chatting about trivial things like the weather or his favorite coffee shop. And then, one afternoon, he asked a question that would set the wheels of their story in motion. "Hey Lisa," he said casually, as they walked out of the studio together. "You ever tried the new cafe on Oak Street? They've got this amazing matcha latte. I think you'd love it." Lisa hesitated, the question hanging in the air. It wasn't a date, at least not explicitly, but it felt like an invitation into something unspoken. Something dangerous. "Oh, I've been meaning to check it out," she replied, her voice steady despite the quickening of her heartbeat. "Maybe I will sometime." Jake smiled. "You should. Let me know what you think." The following week, Lisa found herself at the cafe on Oak Street, her heart racing as she scanned the room. And there he was, sitting at a corner table, his face lighting up as he spotted her. "Lisa, I was hoping you'd show up," Jake said, standing to greet her. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, weaving between light-hearted banter and deeper topics. Jake's passion for teaching yoga, Lisa's dreams of pursuing a career in art, and the challenges of balancing family life. For the first time in years, Lisa felt truly seen, like someone was paying attention to her as an individual, not just a wife or a mom. As they parted ways that afternoon, Jake placed a hand on her arm, a touch so brief and casual yet electric. "It was really nice talking to you, Lisa. Let's do this again sometime." Lisa nodded, her mind a whirlwind of emotions as she walked to her car. What had started as a harmless meeting now felt like the beginning of something much more complicated. That night, Lisa lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Mark was snoring softly beside her, oblivious to the storm brewing in her mind. She thought about Jake's smile, the way he listened, the way he made her feel alive. And then she thought about her marriage. Steady, predictable, but undeniably lacking. Was it really so wrong to want more? To crave the thrill of being desired again? These questions gnawed at her as she drifted into a restless sleep. The next morning, Lisa tried to shake off the guilt. She told herself it was nothing, a harmless connection with someone who happened to notice her in a way Mark hadn't in years. But as she drove Oliver and Sophie to school, her phone buzzed with a message that would shatter that illusion. "Hey, Lisa. Great seeing you yesterday. Let's grab coffee again soon. Jake." Her hands trembled as she read the message, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. She knew she was standing at a crossroads, and whichever path she chose, there would be no turning back. And that's where we'll pause for now. Lisa's story is just beginning, and trust me, it's about to get a whole lot more complicated. But before we dive into what happens next, let me know your thoughts so far. Leave a comment, hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter of this unfolding drama. Lisa didn't respond to Jake's message right away. She told herself she needed time to think, to clear her head and figure out what exactly she wanted. But if she were being honest, she already knew. The thrill, the spark, the attention Jake gave her, it was intoxicating. It was everything her life had been missing. The next few days at home only amplified these feelings. Mark was more distant than ever, coming home late and burying himself in work emails during dinner. Even when he was physically present, his mind seemed a million miles away. One evening, as Lisa sat across the table from him, she decided to test the waters. "How was work?" she asked, keeping her tone light. Mark barely looked up from his phone. "Busy. You?" Lisa swallowed her frustration. "Same old. Took the kids to the park. Sophie climbed the jungle gym all by herself." "That's great," he muttered, his attention still glued to the screen. Lisa wanted to scream. Instead, she smiled tightly and excused herself, retreating to the bedroom where she stared at Jake's message again. Without thinking, she typed a reply. "Hey, it was great seeing you too. Coffee sounds good." When? She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Within minutes, Jake responded with a time and place, his enthusiasm practically leaping off the screen. Lisa's stomach flipped. It was happening. Their next meeting wasn't at the cafe but a quiet little park on the edge of town. Jake had suggested it, saying the serene environment would make it easier to talk. And Lisa, desperate for something, anything, that felt different from her routine, eagerly agreed. When she arrived, Jake was already there, leaning casually against a tree. His smile was warm, disarming, and when he walked up to greet her, Lisa felt her nerves melt away. They strolled through the park, talking about everything and nothing. Jake asked about her art, something Mark hadn't done in years, and Lisa found herself opening up in a way that surprised even her. She told him about her struggles to find time for herself, about the parts of her marriage that felt stagnant, about the dreams she'd put on hold. Jake listened intently, his gaze never wavering. "You deserve to feel appreciated, Lisa," he said softly, his words landing like a bomb on her wounded pride. "You're too amazing to be taken for granted." Lisa looked at him, her heart pounding. It wasn't just his words. It was the way he said them, the way he made her feel seen. She hadn't realized how starved she was for this kind of attention until now. As the sun began to set, Jake turned to her. "Can I be honest?" Lisa nodded, her breath catching. "I've been thinking about you," he admitted, his voice low. "A lot. And I know this might sound crazy, but I feel like there's something here. Don't you?" Lisa's heart raced. She wanted to say no, to push him away, to preserve the delicate balance of her life. But instead, she found herself nodding. "I do," she whispered. Jake stepped closer, his hand brushing hers. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. And then, just as he leaned in, Lisa's phone buzzed loudly, shattering the silence. It was Mark. A simple text, "Running late. Don't wait up." Lisa laughed nervously, pulling back. "I should go," she said, her voice trembling. Jake nodded, his expression a mix of understanding and disappointment. "Of course. But, Lisa, think about what you want. You deserve to be happy." As she walked back to her car, Jake's words echoed in her mind. What did she want? Back at home, the guilt set in. Lisa went through the motions: dinner, bedtime stories, tucking the kids in, all while replaying the park scene in her head. She tried to focus on Mark when he finally came home, but his perfunctory kiss on her cheek only deepened her frustration. Lying in bed that night, Lisa stared at the ceiling. Was she really going to risk everything for a man she barely knew? Or was this about something bigger? Something she couldn't get from Mark no matter how hard she tried? She didn't have an answer. But the next day, when Jake texted her again, she didn't hesitate to reply. The meetings became more frequent. Coffee here, a walk there, stolen moments that felt increasingly intimate. Lisa found herself checking her phone constantly, her mood lifting every time Jake's name appeared on the screen. With him, she felt alive, desirable, important. But with each meeting, the line between friendship and something more grew blurrier. And Lisa, despite her guilt, found herself crossing it again and again. One afternoon, they met at Jake's apartment under the guise of helping him decorate. Lisa told herself it was innocent, that nothing would happen. But the moment she stepped inside, she knew she was lying to herself. Jake greeted her with a smile, handing her a glass of wine. "To new beginnings," he said, clinking his glass against hers. Lisa laughed, the sound nervous but genuine. They sat on the couch, talking as the afternoon sun streamed through the windows. And then, as the conversation lulled, Jake leaned in. "Lisa," he said softly, his hand brushing her cheek, "I don't want to ruin anything for you, but I can't stop thinking about you." Lisa's breath hitched. She should have stopped him, should have walked away. But instead, she closed the gap between them, their lips meeting in a kiss that was both tentative and electric. And just like that, the floodgates opened. What had started as a harmless connection spiraled into something far more dangerous. Lisa and Jake began meeting in secret, their stolen moments growing bolder, more passionate. Lisa told herself she could keep it under control, that she could compartmentalize her life. But the reality was far messier. Every time she returned home to Mark, the weight of her actions pressed down on her. She began to notice the little things. Mark's tired smile, the way he played with the kids, the way he still kissed her goodbye every morning even when she felt like she didn't deserve it. The guilt was suffocating. But so was the thought of giving up the one thing that made her feel alive. And that's where we'll leave it for now. Lisa's choices are catching up to her, and the fallout is just beginning. What do you think will happen next? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for the next chapter in this unfolding drama. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. As the days turned into weeks, Lisa's double life became increasingly difficult to manage. Every secret meeting with Jake heightened her excitement and her anxiety. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking on thin ice, that at any moment, everything could come crashing down. One evening, while Lisa was preparing dinner, her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced over and saw Jake's name flashing on the screen. Heart racing, she quickly swiped to open the message. "Thinking about you. Can't wait to see you tomorrow." Lisa smiled, a mix of warmth and guilt spreading through her chest. But before she could respond, Mark walked into the kitchen. She hurriedly locked the phone and shoved it into her back pocket. "What's for dinner?" Mark asked casually, peering into the pot on the stove. "Pasta," Lisa replied, forcing a smile. "Your favorite." Mark grunted in acknowledgement, his focus already shifting to something else. Lisa felt a pang of sadness. Moments like this only reinforced the growing chasm between them. Yet, it also served as a justification for her actions, a dangerous rationale that she clung to more tightly with each passing day. A discovery that changes everything. The turning point came one Friday evening when Lisa and Jake met at their usual spot, a boutique hotel on the edge of town. The plan was simple. Dinner at the hotel's restaurant, followed by a few stolen hours together before Lisa returned home. She told Mark she was meeting a friend for drinks, and he, as usual, didn't question it. Everything seemed perfect. That is, until the waiter brought over their bill. "Here you go, Mr. and Mrs. Carter," the waiter said with a smile, placing the receipt on the table. Lisa froze. "Mrs. Carter?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake laughed nervously. I might have told them we were married to avoid any awkward questions." Lisa stared at him, her stomach churning. The room felt suddenly smaller, the weight of what they were doing crushing her chest. For the first time, the reality of their situation hit her like a freight train. This wasn't just a harmless fling anymore. It was a full-blown affair, and it was spiraling out of control. The unraveling begins. As Lisa drove home that night, her mind raced with conflicting emotions. She was angry at Jake for being so careless, but she was angrier at herself for letting things get this far. When she walked through the door, Mark was sitting on the couch, flipping through channels. "Hey," he said, barely looking up. "How was your night?" Lisa forced a smile. "Good. Just catching up with Emily." Mark nodded, his attention already back on the TV. Lisa felt a wave of guilt so intense, it almost knocked her off her feet. She excused herself and went straight to bed, the weight of her choices pressing heavily on her chest. A sudden revelation. The next morning, Lisa woke up to find Mark sitting at the kitchen table, his laptop open in front of him. His expression was unreadable, and Lisa felt a flicker of unease. "What's going on?" she asked, pouring herself a cup of coffee. Mark didn't look up. "I got an interesting email last night." Lisa's heart stopped. "Oh? From who?" Mark finally met her gaze, his eyes cold. "Does the name Jake Carter mean anything to you?" Lisa's mug slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. The sound seemed to echo in the silence that followed. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, her voice trembling. Mark stood up, his towering frame suddenly feeling intimidating. "Don't lie to me, Lisa. I saw the messages, the pictures." Lisa felt the blood drain from her face. "Mark, I can explain." "Explain," he interrupted, his voice rising. "Explain how you've been sneaking around with another man while I'm here working my ass off for this family?" Tears streamed down Lisa's face as she tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Mark grabbed his keys and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. Jake's role in the chaos. Lisa was left reeling. She didn't know how Mark had found out or what he planned to do next. In a panic, she called Jake. "You need to meet me," she said, her voice shaking. "Mark knows. He found out." Jake sounded calm, almost detached. "Okay, let's meet at the park." When they met, Lisa was a mess of tears and fear. "He's going to leave me," she sobbed. "He's going to take the kids. I can't lose my family, Jake." Jake placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Hey, we'll figure this out. Don't worry." But Lisa could see the unease in his eyes. For the first time, she realized that Jake had no plan, no answers. This was just as much a mess for him as it was for her. Mark's revenge. The next few days were a blur. Mark moved out of the house and refused to answer Lisa's calls. When she finally managed to get a hold of him, it was only to hear him say, "Talk to my lawyer." Lisa's world crumbled. She hadn't just hurt Mark. She had destroyed their family. And for what? A fleeting escape from her problems? The reality of her choices hit her hard, and she realized that she might not be able to fix what she had broken. The climax approaches. As Lisa grappled with the fallout of her affair, Jake became increasingly distant. The thrill that had once defined their relationship was gone, replaced by tension and regret. Lisa tried to lean on him for support, but it was clear that he wasn't willing or able. to shoulder the weight of her crumbling life. One evening, as they sat together in his apartment, Lisa finally confronted him. "Do you even care about me?" she asked, her voice cracking. Jake looked away, unable to meet her eyes. "Lisa, I didn't sign up for this. I didn't think it would get this messy." Lisa felt a surge of anger. "Messy? This is my life, Jake. My marriage is over. My kids." She choked on her words, unable to continue. Jake stood up, running a hand through his hair. "Maybe we should take a break. Let things cool down." "A break?" Lisa repeated, her voice filled with disbelief. "You're the one who said I deserved to be happy. You said you cared about me." "I do care," Jake said, but his tone lacked conviction. "But this is too much, and that's where we'll leave it for now." Lisa's world is falling apart, and the stakes couldn't be higher. What do you think will happen next? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for the next chapter in this unfolding drama. The cracks deepen. The fallout from Mark's discovery wasn't just a storm. It was a hurricane tearing through Lisa's life. She spent her days drowning in regret and her nights lying awake, replaying every moment that led to this point. The once comfortable life she had shared with Mark now seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a cold and isolating reality. Mark, on the other hand, wasn't staying silent. He had begun telling close friends and family about Lisa's affair, framing her as the villain in their crumbling marriage. While Lisa had expected some backlash, the depth of Mark's anger surprised her. His carefully curated narrative painted her as the ungrateful wife who destroyed their home for a fleeting romance. Lisa felt the pressure mounting from every side. At work, she struggled to focus, aware of the judgmental stares from coworkers who had heard whispers of her affair. At home, the silence was deafening. The once vibrant house now felt like a hollow shell. Mark's next move. Mark wasn't just wallowing in anger, he was strategizing. Lisa received a call one afternoon from her lawyer, informing her that Mark was filing for full custody of their children. Felt like a punch to the gut. Losing her marriage was one thing, but the thought of losing her kids was unbearable. Desperate to salvage what little control she had left, Lisa tried reaching out to Mark. After countless ignored calls and texts, he finally agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a quiet cafe downtown. When she arrived, Mark was already seated, his arms crossed and his expression cold. Lisa hesitated before sitting across from him, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her coffee cup. "Mark, please, we need to talk," she began, her voice shaky. "There's nothing to talk about," Mark replied flatly. "You made your choice, Lisa. Now I'm making mine." Lisa's heart sank. "I know I hurt you. I know I made a mistake. But please don't take the kids away from me. They need both of us." Mark leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Did you think about them when you were sneaking around with Jake? Did you think about what this would do to our family?" Lisa's voice cracked as she tried to respond. "I wasn't thinking, Mark. I was selfish and I hate myself for it. But don't punish the kids because of my mistakes." For a moment, Mark's expression softened, but the anger quickly returned. "You can't undo what you've done, Lisa. Actions have consequences. And right now, I don't trust you to put the kids first." As Mark stood up to leave, Lisa reached out, grabbing his hand. "Mark, please." He pulled away, shaking his head. "We'll let the court decide." Jake's escape plan. Meanwhile, Jake was becoming more distant with every passing day. What had started as a thrilling affair had turned into a nightmare he desperately wanted to escape. Lisa's calls became more frequent, her pleas for support more frantic. And while Jake had initially promised to stand by her, the pressure was too much for him. One evening, Lisa showed up unannounced at Jake's apartment. She was visibly distraught, her eyes red from crying. "I need you," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't do this alone." Jake hesitated before letting her in. As she poured out her heart, telling him about Mark's custody battle and her fears of losing everything, Jake remained silent. When she finally stopped speaking, he let out a heavy sigh. "Lisa, I didn't sign up for this. I can't be your lifeline." Lisa stared at him, Disbelief etched across her face. What are you saying? I'm saying, maybe it's time we take a step back, Jake replied, avoiding her gaze. A step back, Lisa repeated, her voice rising. You promised you'd be here for me, Jake. You said you cared about me. I do care, he said, his tone defensive. But this is too much. I didn't think it would get this complicated. Lisa felt a surge of anger. Complicated? My life is falling apart, Jake. And now you're just going to walk away. Jake didn't respond. His silence was all the confirmation Lisa needed. She stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door behind her. A glimmer of hope? Lisa's lowest point came a few days later when she found herself sitting alone in the children's bedroom, surrounded by their toys and clothes. She clutched a stuffed animal to her chest, tears streaming down her face as she thought about the possibility of losing her kids. But as she sat there, a new determination began to take root. She realized that wallowing in self-pity wouldn't fix anything. If she wanted to fight for her family, she needed to take action. The next day, Lisa met with her lawyer to discuss her options. Together, they began to build a case to show the court that she was still a fit and loving mother. Lisa also started attending therapy, hoping to prove to both herself and the court that she was taking responsibility for her mistakes and working to become a better person. Mark's surprise decision. Just as Lisa began to regain a sense of control, Mark threw another curveball her way. He showed up at the house unannounced, his expression unreadable. We need to talk, he said, his tone serious. Lisa nodded, bracing herself for another confrontation. But what Mark said next took her by surprise. I've been thinking, maybe we don't need to drag this into court. Lisa blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. What do you mean? I mean, maybe we can work out a custody agreement on our own, Mark explained. For the kids' sake. Lisa felt a flicker of hope. Mark, I want to make this right. I'll do whatever it takes. Mark held up a hand, silencing her. This isn't about you and me, Lisa. This is about them. I'm still angry, and I don't know if I can ever forgive you. But I won't let this ruin their lives. It wasn't the reconciliation Lisa had hoped for, but it was a start. For the first time in weeks, she felt like there was a path forward, even if it wasn't the one she had envisioned. The climax looms. As Lisa and Mark began tentative discussions about co-parenting, the tension between them remained palpable. Every conversation was a careful dance, each of them trying to navigate their new reality without reigniting old wounds. Meanwhile, Jake was all but out of the picture. Lisa hadn't heard from him since their last argument, and she realized that she didn't care anymore. Her focus was now on her kids and finding a way to rebuild her life. But the question remained, could Lisa and Mark truly move past this? Or was their marriage irrevocably broken? And that's where we'll leave it for now. The tension is at its peak, and the stakes couldn't be higher. What do you think will happen next? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for the next chapter in this unfolding drama. The moment of truth approaches. With the groundwork for co-parenting discussions laid, Lisa hoped the worst was behind her. But beneath the surface, both she and Mark were still wrestling with unresolved emotions. Mark's simmering resentment and Lisa's lingering guilt were like gasoline and fire, just waiting for the right spark to ignite. For Mark, the process of co-parenting felt like walking a tightrope. He was trying to be civil for the sake of the kids, but every interaction with Lisa dredged up painful memories. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the fact that she had risked their family's happiness for someone who turned out to be a coward. Lisa, on the other hand, was determined to show Mark that she was a changed person. She threw herself into every parenting duty, attending every school meeting, helping with homework, and even baking cupcakes for the class fundraiser. Something she'd never done before. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling that Mark was waiting for her to fail. Mark's breaking point. The tension reached a boiling point one evening when Mark came to pick up the kids for the weekend. Lisa greeted him at the door with a tentative smile, trying to appear friendly. I packed their things, she said, gesturing toward the kids' duffel bags by the door. Mark barely acknowledged her, instead calling for the kids to come downstairs. As they waited, Lisa couldn't resist trying to break the ice. Mark, I just want to say, thank you for giving me a chance to prove myself. Mark turned to face her, his jaw tightening. Prove yourself? You think a few weeks of playing Supermom erases what you did? Lisa flinched but kept her composure. I know it doesn't, but I'm trying, Mark. For the kids. For us. Mark let out a bitter laugh. For us? Lisa, there is no us. There hasn't been since the day you decided to sleep with Jake. You're just lucky I care about the kids enough to keep this civil. Before Lisa could respond, the kids came bounding down the stairs, excited to spend the weekend with their dad. Mark grabbed their bags and ushered them out to the car without another word. As the door closed behind him, Lisa sank onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. She realized that no matter what she did, Mark might never forgive her, and she wasn't sure she could live with that. A surprise visit. The next day, Lisa was startled by a knock at the door. When she opened it, she found Jake standing there, looking sheepish. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice a mix of shock and irritation. "I wanted to talk," Jake said. "I know I've been distant, but I've been thinking about us, about what we could be." Lisa stared at him, dumbfounded. "What we could be?" "Jake, my life is falling apart because of you. Do you have any idea what I've been through?" Jake raised his hands defensively. "I didn't mean for things to get so messy. But I care about you, Lisa. I want to be with you." Lisa shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "You want to be with me? Jake, you bailed when things got tough. And now you think you can just waltz back into my life and pick up where we left off." Jake looked genuinely hurt. "I made a mistake, okay? I was scared. But I'm here now." Lisa stepped back, her voice firm. "It's too late, Jake. I'm trying to fix things with my family. You're not part of that picture." Before Jake could respond, Lisa closed the door in his face, her heart pounding. For the first time, she felt a sense of clarity. Jake had been a mistake, a distraction from the real problems in her life. Mark's revelation. Later that weekend, Mark was spending time with the kids at the park when he ran into an old friend, Sarah. They hadn't seen each other in years, but the connection was immediate. Sarah was warm, funny, and easy to talk to, a stark contrast to the strained conversations he'd been having with Lisa. As they caught up, Mark couldn't help but notice how much he was enjoying Sarah's company. For the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of lightness, as if the weight of his anger and sadness had momentarily lifted. When Sarah mentioned that she was recently divorced, Mark hesitated. Was it too soon to consider moving on? A family emergency. Just as Mark and Lisa were beginning to navigate their separate paths, an unexpected crisis brought them back together. One evening, their youngest child, Sophie, came down with a high fever and severe stomach pain. Lisa rushed her to the emergency room, calling Mark on the way. Mark arrived at the hospital within minutes, his face pale with worry. As they sat together in the waiting room, the tension between them seemed to evaporate, replaced by a shared concern for their daughter. When the doctor finally emerged with an update, both Mark and Lisa held their breath. Thankfully, it was nothing serious, just a bad case of the stomach flu. But the scare had shaken them both. As they drove home, Lisa glanced at Mark. "Thank you for coming so quickly." Mark nodded, his voice soft. "Of course. She's my daughter, too." For the first time in weeks, there was a moment of genuine connection between them, a reminder of the bond they once shared. The turning point. That night, as Lisa lay awake in bed, she realized something important. If there was any hope of salvaging her relationship with Mark, she needed to let go of her own guilt and focus on rebuilding trust. Meanwhile, Mark found himself replaying the events of the day. Seeing Lisa so vulnerable and concerned for their daughter had reminded him of the woman he fell in love with. The next morning, Mark called Lisa. "Can we meet? I think we need to talk." Lisa's heart raced. Of course. When they met at a nearby park, Mark's expression was unreadable. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything that's happened." Lisa nodded, bracing herself for the worst. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Mark admitted, "but I also don't want to live the rest of my life holding on to this anger." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. Mark, I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. I just want a chance to show you that I can be better. Mark hesitated before speaking again. I'm willing to try, but it's going to take time. For the first time in weeks, Lisa felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't a reconciliation, but it was a step in the right direction. The climax nears. With Mark's decision to give their relationship a second chance, the stakes were higher than ever. Both he and Lisa knew that this was their last shot to make things work. Not just for themselves, but for their children. But would they be able to overcome the scars of betrayal and rebuild the trust that had been shattered? Stay tuned as the story hurtles toward its emotional climax. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for the next chapter of this gripping tale. The high-stakes ultimatum. After their emotional conversation at the park, Lisa and Mark agreed to try co-parenting with a new sense of civility. However, the unresolved tension between them lingered, like storm clouds threatening to burst. Mark's hesitance to fully forgive Lisa was palpable. He kept her at arm's length, unable to forget the betrayal that had turned his life upside down. For Lisa, every interaction felt like walking on eggshells, but she was determined to earn back Mark's trust, even if it took a lifetime. The real test came when Mark received an unexpected job offer in a neighboring state. It was a dream position that offered better pay and the opportunity to start fresh, but it also meant uprooting the kids and making a decision that could forever alter their already fragile family dynamic. When Mark brought it up during a drop-off, Lisa's heart sank. "You're thinking of leaving?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's not just about me," Mark replied. "This could be a chance for all of us to start over. The kids would have better schools, and I'd have more time with them." Lisa's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Mark, I've been working so hard to rebuild this family. You can't just take them away." Mark's gaze softened, but his tone remained firm. "I'm not trying to take them away, Lisa, but I can't stay stuck here forever. I need to think about what's best for them, and for me." The conversation ended with no resolution, leaving Lisa to grapple with the possibility of losing not only her children, but the fragile connection she was trying to mend with Mark. The tipping point. As the deadline for Mark's decision approached, Lisa found herself spiraling. She couldn't shake the fear that he would leave, taking their kids and her last chance at redemption with him. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, she sat alone in the living room, staring at a framed photo of their family from happier times. The weight of her choices pressed down on her, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to cry. Meanwhile, Mark was facing his own inner turmoil. The job offer represented a fresh start, a chance to escape the painful memories tied to his hometown. But as he watched his children sleep that night, he wondered if running away was truly the answer. The tension reached its peak during a school event, where both Mark and Lisa were in attendance. Seeing them in the same room brought whispers from other parents who had caught wind of the affair. Mark overheard one particularly cutting comment about Lisa and felt a surge of protective anger, an emotion he hadn't expected to feel. When the event ended, Mark approached Lisa as she helped the kids into her car. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low. Lisa hesitated but nodded. They walked a few paces away, out of earshot of the kids. "I heard what people were saying," Mark began. "And as much as I want to hate you for what you did, I don't want our kids growing up surrounded by this kind of judgment." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "Mark, I know I've made it hard for you to trust me, but I'm trying to be better. Not just for the kids, but for you." Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know if I can ever trust you the way I did before, but I do know one thing. I don't want our kids to lose their mother." It was a small step, but it felt monumental. For the first time, Lisa saw a glimmer of hope that their fractured relationship might someday heal. Jake's final appearance. Just when it seemed like Lisa and Mark were on the verge of a breakthrough, Jake re-entered the picture, throwing everything into chaos. Lisa was at the grocery store when she spotted him near the produce aisle. She froze, her stomach twisting in knots. "Lisa," Jake said, approaching her with a sheepish smile. "I've been wanting to talk to you." Lisa's initial instinct was to walk away, but curiosity, and a lingering sense of unresolved emotions, kept her rooted in place. "What do you want, Jake?" she asked, her voice cold. "I heard about everything," Jake said. "I know things have been hard for you, and I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything." Lisa narrowed her eyes. "Sorry for what, exactly? For sleeping with me? For disappearing when things got tough? Or for ruining my life?" Jake flinched at her words but didn't back down. "I made mistakes, Lisa, but I never stopped caring about you." Lisa shook her head, anger and disbelief coursing through her. "Caring about me? Jake, you don't even know what that means. If you cared, you wouldn't have left me to deal with the fallout alone." Before Jake could respond, Lisa turned and walked away, her heart pounding. She didn't realize Mark had been standing a few aisles over, witnessing the entire exchange. The confrontation. That evening, Mark confronted Lisa about what he'd seen. "So, Jake's back in the picture?" he asked, his tone laced with bitterness. Lisa shook her head vehemently. "No, Mark. I told him to leave me alone. He's not part of my life anymore." Mark's expression was unreadable as he studied her. "Do you mean that?" "Yes," Lisa said, her voice firm. "Mark, I've made so many mistakes, but Jake was the biggest one. I see that now. All I want is to fix things with you and the kids." For a long moment, Mark said nothing. Then, with a deep sigh, he nodded. "All right, but if he shows up again, I want to know." The decision. As Mark's deadline for the job offer loomed, he found himself at a crossroads. Moving away would mean a fresh start, but it would also mean tearing apart the fragile progress he and Lisa had made. After a long night of reflection, Mark finally made his decision. The next morning, he called Lisa and asked her to meet him at the park where they'd had their first date. When Lisa arrived, Mark was waiting on a bench, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I turned down the job," he said before she could speak. Lisa's breath caught. "Why?" Mark met her gaze, his eyes filled with a mix of vulnerability and determination. "Because as much as I want to run away from everything, I can't run away from my kids. And I can't run away from the chance to see if we can make this work." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "Mark, I don't deserve this, but I promise I'll do everything I can to make it worth it." Mark nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "We'll see." The weeks following Mark's decision to stay marked the beginning of a new chapter for their fractured family. It wasn't an instant fix, nor was it easy, but it was a start. Both Mark and Lisa had to confront their lingering emotions, their shared history, and the deep scars left by the affair. Mark began by setting clear boundaries and expectations. He was honest about his feelings, explaining to Lisa that forgiveness would take time and trust had to be rebuilt piece by piece. For Lisa, this was her chance to prove her commitment, not just to Mark but to herself and her children. Their first major breakthrough came during a family dinner. It was a simple meal, shared laughs, and light-hearted moments that reminded them of the good times they once had. It wasn't perfect, there was still an undercurrent of tension, but it felt like progress. Mark noticed the effort Lisa was making. She attended every school event, rearranged her schedule to be more present, and even joined a support group to work through her emotions and behaviors. Lisa, on the other hand, saw a shift in Mark. He was more open to conversations and even started letting down some of the walls he'd built. Jake's final goodbye. In a surprising turn of events, Jake reached out to Mark. It was an unplanned encounter at a local coffee shop, one that neither man particularly wanted, but both knew was necessary. "Mark," Jake began, nervously stirring his coffee, "I just want to say I'm sorry. I know what I did was wrong, and I'm not here to make excuses." Mark's jaw tightened, but he nodded for Jake to continue. "I wanted to tell you in person that I'm leaving town for good," Jake said. "It's clear that my presence here isn't helping anyone, and I want Lisa to have the space she needs to focus on her family." Mark's response was curt but firm. "Leaving is the best thing you can do. Stay away from my family. This is your last chance to do the right thing." Jake nodded solemnly. "You have my word." With that, Jake left, marking the end of a painful chapter in Lisa and Mark's lives. Rebuilding trust. As the months passed, Mark and Lisa continued to rebuild their lives together. Therapy became a cornerstone of their healing process. They attended sessions both individually and as a couple, diving deep into their fears, insecurities, and hopes for the future. One pivotal moment came during a session when Lisa admitted the full extent of her struggles. "I think I was afraid of losing myself," she confessed. "I thought being with Jake would make me feel alive. But all it did was show me how much I already had and how much I stood to lose." Mark's response was measured but heartfelt. "I'll never fully understand why it happened, but I'm willing to try. If we're going to make this work, we have to be honest with each other, even when it's hard." From that point on, their relationship began to take on a new form, one rooted in honesty, accountability, and mutual respect. The kids' perspective. For their children, the changes were subtle but significant. They noticed their parents smiling more, arguing less, and working together as a team. Family game nights became a weekly tradition, and weekends were filled with outings to the park or trips to the movies. One evening, as they tucked the kids into bed, their eldest, Emma, looked up at them and said, "You guys seem happy again." Mark and Lisa exchanged a glance, their eyes brimming with emotion. "We're trying, sweetheart," Lisa said, brushing a strand of hair from Emma's face. "We're trying really hard." A renewed commitment. On the anniversary of their first date, Mark surprised Lisa with an evening reminiscent of their early days. He took her to the same restaurant where they'd shared their first meal together, even ordering the same dishes. As they sat across from each other, Mark reached for Lisa's hand. "I know we've been through hell," he said, his voice steady. "But I believe in second chances. And I believe in us." Lisa's eyes filled with tears as she squeezed his hand. "Mark, I'll spend the rest of my life making this right. I promise." Looking ahead, by the end of the year, their family felt more united than ever. It wasn't a picture-perfect fairy tale, but it was real, and it was theirs. Mark and Lisa learned to communicate better, support each other, and prioritize what truly mattered: their family. Mark even started coaching their son's soccer team, while Lisa volunteered at their daughter's school. Together, they created new memories, ones that would eventually overshadow the pain of the past. Final thoughts. This story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of forgiveness. It's a reminder that while mistakes can shatter trust, they don't have to define a relationship. With effort, patience, and genuine love, even the deepest wounds can heal. What do you think? Could you forgive someone who betrayed your trust, or would it be too much to bear? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and until next time, take care and cherish the ones you love.